Good afternoon. I appreciate all of you coming on time. This is great. We've got a wonderful speaker for you all. We are videotaping today, so please be sure cell phones are turned off. I don't know that you want your cell phone recorded for posterity. So if you'll please silence them, that would be great. In our first 4 sessions, conversations regarding transit from the federal, state, and local level. We've talked about successes. We've talked about, I don't want to say failures, maybe not successes, maybe challenges is a better word. Tonight, we're going to talk about changing the conversation. And we're going to discuss how to facilitate conversations on transit options and opportunities going forward. We are especially excited to have our speaker, our first speaker this night, who flew in from Salt Lake City to come and speak to you all. Michael Merrill is the Director of Public Policy at the Salt Lake City Chamber. And Michael helped create and lead the Utah Transportation Coalition. And they passed the most comprehensive transportation funding legislation in Utah. They have built an extensive transportation system in their state, which if you were on the Nashville Chamber trip, you got to see it, and it was quite amazing. They are currently working on passing another ballot initiative to secure funds for Utah's transit, active transportation. So with that, I would like you to join me in welcoming Michael and sit back and relax because you're really going to enjoy what he has to say. Please join me in welcoming Michael.
Thank you. I'm going to make you uncomfortable. I'm probably going to walk right in the aisles. I want you to be engaged. Ask questions, please, please, please ask questions. Of course, I have a good PowerPoint, but I know how your day has probably been. You're coming in here on your own time. I don't want to be deaf by PowerPoint, so if I get boring at all, holler really loud. That was a great intro. Really excited to be here in Nashville, my first time. So I've been here all of 2 hours, and Tommy gave me the 6-pack tour of town without the 6-pack. I appreciated that. But a little bit about myself. I'm actually Michael Parker. I got married in June and took my wife's name. I also changed my cell phone last fall, so I've now officially entered the Millennial Witness Protection Program. On top of that, I've been at the Chamber about 4 years, have a true passion for business leadership in a community. I love business leaders. I love when they give of their time and their influence, have a lot of respect for it. I'm also a good public policy guy. So I have a background, graduate degree in public policy, economics, worked at a couple think tanks in Salt Lake before I ended up at the Chamber with my mentor. And so I just want to commend all of you today for taking the time and to dig deep on something like this and try and make your community better. It says volumes that this is the 6th class, Carrie? 6 classes of everybody, digging in, trying to understand this topic and be advocates for this. So here we go. So I'm going to back way up, and if you were on the leadership tour, you got to see some of what happened in Salt Lake in the last decade, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But there's a lot that's gone on both in the last 5 years and many years before that. But this is the big shiny, train set we all got about 10 years ago. So we got commuter rail about 10 years ago. And it's what people have come to see and hear and how we did it. And I'll tell you, people in Salt Lake don't know what they have, the amount of infrastructure, how good of an infrastructure they have, how remarkable the level of investment per capita we've had. So, one of our missions as a chamber is we're trying just to get better about telling about the resource we have, because there's folks like you guys reaching out and asking, how do we get better? Because we don't have anything. We've got a bus system or something like that. So that slide went crazy. But at the basic level, a couple years ago, the chamber kind of stepped in a real way to help crystallize the conversations on transportation and formed what you couldn't see at the bottom, but it's called the Utah Transportation Coalition. It's our moving forward. So your chambers kind of started the discussion about moving forward. It's a collaboration between industry folks, non-industry folks. It's chaired by the regional vice president of Wells Fargo in Salt Lake. He's over all 8 Intermountain states. I mean, he's a banker. When he first started, he was probably what some of you, super green on the topic, didn't know what he was doing at all, and by the end, I can just put him in front of a crowd and he's a great advocate for transportation. At the most basic level, the coalition drove collaboration. So where we were really missing and spinning the last 5 years has been a lack of coordination and collaboration around stakeholders, whether it was the League of Cities and Towns, Utah Association of Counties, the business community, industry, education versus transportation, other priorities bumping into each other. And that really gave birth to the Utah Transportation Coalition. I would be a bad messenger from Utah if I didn't help dispel a couple of rumors up front. Number one, that's not on the slide, but you can get a drink in Salt Lake. And I don't have to sing that to people from Tennessee because I know there's dry counties in the state. But third most diverse economy in the nation, 85% of our state, we just had our 3 millionth citizen born. So we had a big day in October where we hit the 3 million mark. That was a big deal for us. 85% of those 3 million people live on 3% of the land. We're super dense. So you think of Utah, you think of arches, you think of Zion National Park, you think of skiing and mountains. It's an urban center. And I grew up in Salt Lake County, the most urban county. We're the 4th most urban state per capita in the country. So people don't really think about that, and think about that as we talk about what transit meant to Utah. Third one, we have a young state. So some of what's driven our transportation conversations has been people like me wanting choices. So a lot of, the millennial generation, and oftentimes that's a buzzword, right? It's a changing economic environment, and we all want more choices, whether it's bike share, buses, trains, driving in your car, taking Uber from the airport. You just want choices. But we have a really young state, and it's the majority of the population driving a lot of good conversation in our state. 130 languages spoken in daily commerce. You've all heard about the Mormon missionaries. I'm not one of them, but I have a lot of respect for the LDS Church back home. What that brings is a lot of diversity back home. And a lot of those aren't just missionaries. They're people, we're a refugee state. We get a lot of transplants. And then the last one, a lot of people know we're the 2nd largest Goldman Sachs office in North America. And we're the number one requested relocation site in all of Goldman Sachs. Those folks, people coming to Goldman Sachs, demand transit, demand transportation, demand options. And all these things feed into a conversation on transportation that's way broader than just moving goods and services or moving a workforce from A to B. Decade of investment. So the past 10 years in Utah, if you were in the contracting business, was probably a good time to be in the contracting business because we built a lot of stuff. The first thing, Frontlines 2015, I'll go into a little more detail, but it was nearly $4 billion in investment in transit. That's just exclusively transit, commuter rail, light rail. It was 70 miles in 7 years of new transit investment, huge deal. That was a cost share with the feds. So that's a 70-30 split with the feds on how we got that done. And there was a local option ballot that helped fund our cost share as a local entity. The next one, I-15 Core. We have a major freeway that runs along the corridor where everybody lives, that 85% living on 3%. They got one big freeway that goes right down the middle of it. In the county growing the most, we spent $2 billion during the recession rebuilding their freeway. All state money. 100% paid cash, no federal dollars into it. Major commitment from our state to invest in transportation. I put up there the S-Line streetcar. So in Salt Lake, if you came on the trip, I think you guys went and saw the streetcar. But we went back to our roots. Salt Lake used to have a massive trolley system. And a lot of cities used to have a massive trolley system. And then cars came along and won that fight. But we've reinvested in the streetcar. There's plans for a lot of streetcars. It's a demonstration project as much as anything. Has an awesome green byway next to it, so it's got an active transportation component built into it. And then last one, Green Bike SLC, bike share. I'm on the bike share board. It would be bad if I talked about transportation without talking about bike share, but I love bike share. I saw it in your downtown. Great option. So that's a whole host of text. We're not going to go line by line and read through it. But what I want to give you, and there's two of these, is kind of a comprehensive perspective, because we're going to talk about messaging, but context is incredibly important when we're talking about messaging. As far as my day job at the Chamber, I'm a legislative affairs guy. I'm not a PR person. I work with PR firms. I work with our communications team. I help develop messaging, but I'm not a true communicator by my educational or professional background. But what all of you are is not communicators from a traditional background. And so what I'm going to challenge you to do is understand your own context that you have from your professional world or personal world, and drive that into what you're doing here with the Transit Academy, and as conversations move forward in your community in the next couple of years, bring that to the table. 1970. So Utah, the arches, the rural state you've come to picture in your mind. We got our first transit agency. It spent decades doing majority bus service, consolidating service area because we have private bus companies, you know the drill, and expansion of their service area. Their bread and butter was bus service. And some people used it and a lot of people didn't, and it didn't really drive any progress. In 1992, we had what I'll call our AMP. I've come to learn about your AMP experience, but we went to the ballot for light rail and we lost. We lost in Salt Lake County, and there was a lot of, this is well before my time doing this professionally, but there was a lot of debate on, what really drove the loss, and it was high cost. You've heard that when you were trying to build a BRT. You probably talked about BRT instead of light rail because the cost differential. But folks didn't want to pay for the cost, and folks were used to a 1970s transit agency, so they didn't want to pay for something they didn't know. Uniquely enough, the transit agency worked with the US DOT, got a grant, cobbled together some rainy day funds, had a small revenue stream, and actually built it without the voters. Pretty daredevil, right? Your voters just went to the ballot, said no, and then they built 15 miles anyways. They also spent a bunch of money on preserving rail corridor, which was huge in the long run of things. That was, unbeknownst, the most critical thing that happened in Salt Lake, because it did proof of concept. Riders, as soon as it turned on, it was a success, and everybody loved it, and everybody all of a sudden loved TRAX. So everybody that was 60% no flipped over and went 60% yes, because they rode TRAX, they saw it, they saw what it meant to their community, and it was tangible. A lot of times when you talk about public policy or improvements in your community, to the average person, it's really intangible. They don't get it. They're too busy. 95, you all know we hosted the Olympics in 2002, but in 1995, that kind of became a rallying call for investment in our community. We can't host the Olympics and not be prepared to host the world. I will tell you that a lot of those investments were needed for growth, period. Knowing the context I have today, we were going to make those investments at some point in time. The Olympics just sped it up. It gave us a reason to say now an urgency is important. That led to a gas tax increase in 97, rebuild a freeway. 1998, I don't know if you guys have heard of Envision Utah. I tell you to go check out envisionutah.org. It's a quality growth think tank we have back home. They led a unique initiative much like this, but on a magnitude scale across what is called the Wasatch Front, the 85%. About how we want to grow as a community. And it was completely stakeholder driven. And at the end of that stakeholder process, which was 18 months, outcome showed it that we needed to accelerate transit even more. The demonstration project showed up in the growth strategy. Everybody heard growth's coming, they saw TRAX worked, they said that sounds like a good solution, let's keep going. 2000, We went back to the ballot. Voters approved a $0.25 for light rail, commuter rail north from downtown Salt Lake, bus service, and roads. So it was what I would not call comprehensive today because there's more comprehensive than that, but roads and transit in one bill, or one ballot initiative. That was really important. 2001, 2003, we extended tracks, and then the big one kind of happened. And it's the one we're kind of known for. So the regular track stuff, the 15 miles, the going up to the university for the Olympics, we wouldn't be on the map. You guys wouldn't have come to Salt Lake. You wouldn't have called us if that was it. But in 2006, we went above and beyond. We built 5 lines in 5 years, $300 million under budget, and 2 years ahead of schedule. It was crazy. That's 70 new miles of rail 2 years early and under budget. It was, I mean, it's unbelievable to look back about the guys that got the civic leaders, not just guys. There was plenty of women at the table. I have 5 sisters and a wonderful wife, and she'd yank me over the chains for it. Guys, don't say guys. Community stewards that got around a table and got that done. But in 2006 is when we went to the ballot. So we had secured the federal funding, and then we had to get our own cost share in place, and we went to the ballot. And those previous 2 big moments of going to the ballot where we proved value. We went to the ballot again and said, this is what you're getting, and we showed them what they were getting, and they got what they bought, right? We didn't shortcome the voter. That showed up in 2006. In our 2 biggest counties, we went to the ballot, and both almost passed at 70%. And it was a whole $0.25 driven to the rail projects. There was some road money tossed in, but it was predominantly for commuter rail and those 5 lines. Big deal. 2007, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but we had our first statewide unified transportation plan. 2008, commuter rail completed north, so this bought it clear back in 2000. It took a while to get done. 2013 is the 2 years early. That's when we got all the 5 lines done. We got a line to the airport, so you fly in Salt Lake, you take the train in. It takes you 15 minutes. It goes out to 2 of our major suburban sprawls. And if you don't know Utah, especially Salt Lake County, when I flew in here, I'm always mystified when I fly into places without mountains, number one, because I'm like, look at all that space. Because in our valley, we're totally geographically confined. So Portland has a growth boundary that they've implicitly just put on top of their community and said, you can't go past this. In Utah, we have 5,000-foot peaks that just kind of do that, and we have 2 big lakes. And so it forces us to be smart. There's no other stakeholder at the table saying, don't do that. We have no choice. And so a lot of that, there's an underpinning of that growth pressure of, if we're going to grow along the Wasatch Front, if my kids are going to live in the neighborhood that I grew up in and I want to live in, we got to grow a different way. Transit was a huge piece to that. And then most recently, and it's the piece we talked about a little bit, is we went to the legislature this past year after about 4 years of really hard work and got a gas tax done. We converted it to a percentage, raised it 5 cents, and that will take place on the 1st of January. The percentage tracks with inflation because it's going to move with the price. It's also got floor and ceilings. I can get really wonky really quick about this, but it's going to move over time and grow with the economy, and we won't have to address that problem again. It's a permanent solution. It's a good idea. The other thing they did was all of our sales tax ballot initiatives we've done in the past in Utah, authorized by the Utah State Legislature. Can't raise the sales tax at county level without legislature. They put another one in there. They said the public's asking for it, we're there, and it was the most comprehensive local option we had to date. It was predetermined in its carve-up, so 20% went to counties, 40% went to cities, 40% went specifically for transit service. So when we did this 2006 and 2013, we all know what happened between then, big recession. So we had to reprioritize resources, which led to our bus service being really whittled down. And now we're going back to the bus service with this latest $0.25. Anyways, we're on the ballot Tuesday. We all find out on Tuesday how well we did in 17 counties, 17 different races. The better half of me at work is a young lady named Abby Albrecht. She obviously could not come away from the campaign the week before we go to the ballot, so I'm sorry you have to suffice with me. But what I can tell you, and it says we will see, every race is different, and even though we've had momentum in the past, there are some counties that are not going to be with us on this one, and it will change over time because they'll see the value of investment in one county and be like, gosh darn it, why didn't we go with them that last time?
Michael, this question.
Yeah.
You have on there the slide, the congestion road results. Could you talk about how you harness that congestion, or how that congestion is harnessed to basically get to a yes?
So I should have stuck with my color commentary on here.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. So his question was, in 2006, congestion drove results. So in 2006, growth had hit a point in Salt Lake and Utah County where congestion was the main pressure. You see it in polling that congestion was peaking, people were frustrated about it, and it became what I'll talk about a little bit on messaging as one of the core messages to that campaign to win. It really was, people were frustrated, they knew the solution because we had demonstrated value, and they'd vote for a solution, but they were seeking a solution, and congestion drove people to the ballot box. They were willing to vote to tax themselves to get better transit. And there's a uniquely Utah piece of transit that I'll get to in a little bit, but I may ride transit, and I love transit, but majority of Utah voters are not voting for transit for them. They're voting for you, so that you get out of my way on the road. Our commuter rail, for example, adds essentially a lane and a half onto that main freeway corridor with the amount of commuters we've taken off the freeway and put onto the train. And people identify with that. And something we can talk about a little bit more when we're in messaging. But the key there is most people aren't voting to get on transit themselves. Transit's inherently inconvenient. The bus has a schedule and you have a schedule and you got to figure that out together. So people are like, no, I'm going to jump in my car. 92% of Utahns own a car. And they've done this investment because it's good for the community and they want you to take transit. They don't want to take transit themselves. Yep.
The last one, the vote that's coming up, if you had any money coming from out of state to try to stop the tax increase?
Yes, and I'll come back to that. So her question was, have we had any out-of-state money to fight us? And we have, and I could get really grumpy about that really fast, but we'll do this and then I'll answer that one. This is a picture of my ballot that I turned in, but just recently. Every effort has been different. From the legislative push to educating the public, so prior to this past session and during the session, we did a $500,000 public education campaign about why we needed to raise the gas tax. We didn't say that explicitly, but we said, you know, there's this pressure and this pressure, stuck to good data, good sources, and helped bring the public along so the legislature was with us in March. Key principles for you guys as you look at this and go forward. Communicating need, value, and options. So my boss is the former Senate president of the Utah State Legislature. He is a blue-blooded legislator. He loves options. He is not an executive leader. That is the path, and we're going down it. And if I'm wrong, doggone it, then I'm wrong. He's a legislator. He's a deal maker. He loves options. People love options. People want you to come to them and say, what do you think what we should do? And then take that feedback and go back to what you're doing. That's really important in your messaging, that it's a feedback loop that you've got to have built in. You're doing it today. Build partnerships. We have a leadership institute back home. I'm going to encourage you to stick with this cohort in any way, shape, or form. Stick to lunch dates or whatever you got to do. If it's outside of transit, doesn't matter. Keep building your partnerships. Provide valuable information. We'll get into that in a minute. Show return on investment. We have a very conservative state, as you've probably heard, but maybe not heard. But it's very constructive conservative. If you can show an ROI on a project, you'll get there. And so as we talked about transit and we talked about investing in our roads and getting people off the streets and improving our air quality, the ROI started to show up, and we quantified it, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Empower your elected officials. They're elected, they should lead. U.S. citizens are critical to backing them up and being other voices in the conversation, but if you don't have your electeds, you're not going anywhere. And you know that from any way, shape, or form on a push on anything. You got to get your electeds out in front and passionate about the issue, say we're going to fix it. And you got to stand right behind them, because they're not experts. I mean, I have a part-time legislature, so we have 104 people that go up there for 45 days and try and fix state problems. You throw a gas tax with moving, they look at me like you look at me. You're like, what does that do? You've got to bring them along in a substantial way. And then the last one, educate the public. Make sure that you're bringing your friends and families and colleagues along the same way you would do with an elected official. Give them the same facts and figures that you could get a yes vote on at the Hill that you could at the ballot box. So when we got this request, we got about 5 of us in the room that had worked on this issue over the last 20 years, and we said, what's kind of our game film? What's the core messages over the last 20 years that have worked for us? And as I said, every effort's been different. But these things will hold true all the way through any of the different campaigns. It's just which pressure point got pressed the hardest. The first one, text got goofy there, but it's the economy. In Utah, it's just like here. Looking at Nashville, you got cranes moving like crazy. The economy's hot. People feel that momentum. If you're saying we're investing in the future of that economy, they're there with you. You talk about the movement of goods and services. So when a banker's talking about why it matters to the trucker, you start getting some good synergy going there. Access to jobs. That changes based on your community and what that means. That can be a social equity conversation. We don't really have that back in Salt Lake. We have a very median income population. Everybody hovers around the middle. So access to jobs isn't really a social issue. It's just a workforce issue. But that's a real component of what the economic argument is. And then I can't emphasize this enough. If your contractors and engineers are the guys leading this conversation, you're done. I mean, because it just looks like pork barrel project, and it looks like they're just buttering their own bread and nobody wants to buy it. Your contractors and your engineering companies and everybody else in that world are immense stakeholders. So they may not be out in front, but as I'll talk about on some of the stuff we've done in some of our campaigns, they'll die on the sword for you, and almost to the extent of a fault where they'll get out in front of you too far. And so you as the collective community and civic community need to keep that aspirational hunger to drive change from those communities in check. Investing is conservative. So again, when you talk about ROI, when you talk about prudent planning saves us in the long run, when you talk to reduce costs to both the economy, to business, to an individual from investing, I hope you've seen kind of the bell curve of maintenance and preservation of a road. You spend $1 now or you spend $20 later. Well, you all have kids. I assume some of you have kids. You've gone to the dentist. You know what it's like when they brush their teeth early and when they have to get a root canal. Same principle holds true for infrastructure, and voters will get that. Growth and its implications. Again, I have kind of the ace in the sleeve with the mountains and the lakes. So it's a little different from when I talk about growth to what your community talks about growth. But growth has been, I put it third here. If it hasn't been the third compelling, it's always right there. People feel the pressure of growth continuously. We're adding about 50,000 people to the Wasatch Front every year. And so it's the size of a small city we're plopping on top of already developed land. Folks are looking at it and going, how do we deal with that? But there's countervailing issues with growth that are really important. So congestion, obviously, more people, more congestion, people get that. Air quality in Utah is very unique because of our mountains. We get an inversion, what it's called. We get cold air on top, hot air on bottom during winter. 3 million people, all capped in their emissions, turns into big old smog. Painful. If you work at the chamber, you're like, please don't do that. But air quality is a huge concern back home. It's a quality of life issue. And then quality of life, plain and simple. We all want to get home to our friends and family faster. We all want to get to where we're going faster. It's just inherent that you would want good transportation so you can have an ease of quality of life. So WIFM, what's in it for me? When you back up at the end of the day, we're all selfish. And voters are selfish, and they want to be treated fairly when you communicate with them, and you got to personalize your message to them.
Can we back up to the quality of life for a second? Not that you have to back up the slide, but do you think quality of life resonates more there because you are the youngest in the nation? Is it a generational resonance? Because,
I don't know, do you not want a quality life?
well, yes, I do.
So I think it's across the board. I think, do you have kids and grandkids? Well, kids. I don't imagine you have grandkids.
Thanks. No, I don't, but
Okay.
sweet of them.
Well, and, you know, my family lives within 40 miles of each other in Salt Lake. I mean, we've had one move to Phoenix, and when she's the pariah. But quality of life, in a lot of terms back home, means I can live where my family grew up. Or I can drive across the valley, and it won't take me LA times to get there. So I don't think it's a age gap on quality of life, and I don't think it's, hey, we can go mountain biking on the weekends, we have pretty mountains to look on a regular basis. I think everybody wants to have a good quality of life. I think you guys have a great quality of life. I've done a little homework. The Chamber's little research institution sent me the vital signs. I think that hit the papers probably, but we were reading through the vital signs. One of the top 3 issues that everybody here in Nashville wants is a high quality of life. And it's also amorphous. What does that mean to you versus me? Right? We may want different things. What's in it for me? Personalize every message. And really key here, when you're talking to individuals, you got to change cost to benefit. You can't make it about a 1/4-cent sales tax is going to cost you $40, because people start saying, well, dang it, I'm going to use that $40 for that. You got to say, well, I'm going to make your commute better, or we're going to have cleaner air, or you're going to have more transportation. It has to be a conversation about benefits. You have to be transparent about costs. Don't try and hide the costs. If you go to the ballot about tax increase, don't try and schmooze the voter. They're smart enough that they will just beat you over the barrel over that. Any more questions in the core messages that have really drove us over the while? Economy has been critical to us. Growth pressures. Investing is conservative. We got a conservative state. They get it. And then really making it personalized messages. And we'll drill down on the personalized messages in a minute. Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. Research, survey work, and messaging. So I'm a quant. I'm a quantitative guy. I love data. I'm trained in data. So I always go back to data. Often data gets in your way of communicating well, because you're like, but you had to do these 7 variables to get that answer, and then that's a really hard message to communicate. But your research and your survey work has to be that feedback loop with your messaging. You have to see how people are responding to it, and you have to do it in a real way. And your elected officials feed off survey work. Elected officials want to know what the public is feeling about something, or they want to know how to talk about an issue based on polling. The top left of this is 5 years ago, the Chamber commissioned a study to look at transportation funding options across the board to fund, which is on the right, a 30-year plan of all our needs in our state across the state. And that actually became one big thing that I'm going to charge you with today is, I know you have a huge metro space here, a lot of different players going on. Think as one community, because if you don't, you're going to fail. And we found that with urban and rural in Utah. We have the Utah's Unified Transportation Plan. It had every MPO, so your metropolitan planning organizations, we have 5 of them. It had UDOT, which is our Utah Department of Transportation, and it had UTA, had our transit. In one plan, said this was our needs to 2040. It was all rolled up into one, instead of having 3 plans or 5 plans or 7 plans. And an administrative plan, essentially, right, a planning document, became the backbone for advocacy for the business community. Because we said, we went and did our homework, and here's how we get A to B, let's go electeds. And that's how we've moved that. Another key one, and it's back to my friends at Envision Utah, is when they do their growth studies, and they just did another one that we went through statewide, they do a lot of values research. What do Utahns value? So it's not ideological on, or it's not issue-based, it's just about values. And this is the transportation one. And what it maps to is, number 1, in the blue space you see better infrastructure. Utahns like good infrastructure. They just get it. Number 2, less driving time in commuting. They don't want to spend time in traffic. Number 3, save money and it's more affordable if I invest in transportation. They'll get home quicker, or I'll live closer to work and be able to have access to jobs. And number, well, I guess 4 is kind of goofy, do other things. Back to your quality of life question. For 18% of folks, the next most important thing was just, it gives me opportunities to do other things. But the last one, time with friends and family. People don't look at transportation and think of the truck moving down the road, moving their stuff to their grocery store. They don't think about it like that. It's how it works. I mean, I didn't own a car for 5 years, and I didn't pay gas taxes, but I sure as benefited from a good transportation system, get my groceries to my grocery store. They don't think about it like that. They think about it as, I could be hanging out with you, but I'm stuck in traffic, and this sucks. So anyways, on that one, something to look at. It's a firm called Hearts and Minds, and we can help plug in the Transit Alliance and folks. Think about this in a value sense, not just in nuts and bolts. Don't think it analytically. Think about what people actually care about. Know your audience. We've talked about it a little bit. How you talk to your elected officials is different than you talk to the public, and it's different than you talk to your stakeholder groups. A lot of your stakeholder groups, you're bringing them along. With the public, you're just trying to get your message to them. With the electeds, you're giving them as much information as they'll take, and then they walk away from you and they're like, I'm done with this, leave me alone. The messenger matters. So if I were to go up to the Hill and say, hey guys, I'm from Utah and I think you should do this, it's different if Tommy goes up to the Hill and says, my dad was in the legislature for 30 years. This is the right thing to do. Your messenger matters. And that can't be said enough with who you put in front of the public at the right time. If it's a mom talking about getting home to her kids as a soccer mom, it goes a long way. If it's a business leader talking about how it's good for the economy, you got to line up your message with your messenger in a real way. It can't just be the same person talking all the time. And then speed bumps. Opposition will happen. So Carrie reached out to me and I spoke to a panel, and they had heard like the green field, we're so good at transportation, Utah's awesome speech for like 2.5 days. And then I showed up and was like, we're not that good sometimes. So I think that's why I got an email to come talk to you guys, because I'd kind of give you the story straight. We've screwed up. I showed you in 92, we went to the voters and we failed. The streetcar I talked about, we did not bring the neighborhoods and the business community in that little business district along at all. And now it's this sore point in our success because we want to make it bigger and better, but we didn't do our homework first and we didn't do our stakeholder building. And so that's kind of, there's a local opposition group that's formed around that. We're in 17 counties right now, and we're fighting our great friends, Americans for Prosperity. They have really vested interests in Utahns, and They hired a Utah person. It's just their talking points come from someplace. I won't even say DC because it's worse than DC. But you're going to have opposition, and the number one thing I can tell you in opposition is nothing to do with messaging. It's all to do with the stakeholder group you've built. Because if enough people can just turn on a dime and say that's not right, or we think this is the right thing to do, you're going to turn any opposition group on its head. But you've got to have enough of a coalition built to be able to say this is the right thing to do. And you need leadership. So back to the electeds being out in front, you need real leadership when you start to see opposition. Because otherwise people flounder, and some stakeholder group is not supposed to be out in front, say the business community. The chamber, we're doing a lot of legworks on the 17 counties, but our mayors are the guys that need to be out in front saying, I need this for my local roads. So opposition's all about who's also out in front and who's standing behind them. Yep.
With the failure that you described early on as a sore point, what would you do differently now with what you've learned? How would you have avoided that loss at the beginning?
So I've done a lot of thinking about that coming out here because I knew that question would come. Because, we have, when I had that little commentary that it was proof of concept, that was really important. And I understand with AMP, you were trying to do some proof of concept. You're trying to say this is what transit looks like in Nashville. We should be on the team. That's critical. You got to figure out how to get there, because you're not going to get 30% of folks until you do. Till they see it, till they can ride it, till they can touch it, they just won't be there. So if we were to rewind the tape to 92, and we would have built it in 88. It's hard to say how you can get out in front of that first win, because it's really, really important. It's really important. I'm going to show you a couple ads. Really quickly, I want to talk about these pictures. The one on the top left is my good friend Abby. We did a rally at the Capitol Hill during the last legislative session. You wouldn't believe how much that mattered, because I was like the leg affairs guy, and I was like, please don't spend time on a rally. Like, this is not helpful. It's not going to move the ball. You're not going to get them. It drove so much media for like a month that there was 500 people there caring about the gas tax in a positive way, right? Who's thumbs up on a gas tax? It mattered. It was important. The one down at the bottom is a gentleman named Ron Gibson. He runs our natural gas utility. He's talking about local roads because he looks at himself as a first responder, right? His guys use local roads like a first responder do. It's a really great message. And it's totally just from his experience. So as you go through this, when I started with your personal world feeding into the messaging, it's critical because you have an experience that folks at the chamber and folks at the Transit Alliance, we're going to come up with a plan, and we're going to come up with messaging, and we're going to come up with survey work, and we're going to say, let's go. You guys got to tailor make it to make it personal. Because otherwise it's going to feel very top-down and very clunky. The other two guys I'm just going to mention is the mayor of the large county, and the other guy's the gentleman I talked about from Wells Fargo. Awesome business leader. Okay. This first ad I'm going to show you, there's actually two of them, is from our 06 push. So before my time at the chamber, I just wanted to kind of show you what we've done in the messaging world, what's ended up in the public a little bit, give you a taste of it. These are really compelling, and they're back to that values research.
In Utah, there are 80,000 more cars every year on our highways. If we wait to build more tracks, roads, and commuter rail, congestion will bury us. Vote for Proposition 3, because too many cars is just no fun. Utah's traffic congestion will triple over the next 25 years. So before our transportation system gives out on us, we need to relieve the pressure. Vote for more tracks, roads, and commuter rail. Vote for Proposition 3.
If we could have, we would have ran those ads again this time, because they're really good. And people resonate with them really quickly, and they make it tangible, like the congestion with the heart thing. People get there really fast. folks at R&R Partners is who we worked with on that election cycle for that. I think they're a national firm at this point. This next one is one we did to educate legislators. And then we gave them essentially a toolbox to go talk to their constituents about transportation.
Today, Utah's economy is stronger than ever. But to keep our state moving in the right direction, we have to keep attracting new businesses. That means investing in the backbone of our economy, our transportation system. This will help Utahns get to and from work with shorter commutes and less congestion, and allow commerce to flow, with goods and services getting to their destination swiftly and safely. In fact, if we provide ample funding over the next 3 decades, Utah's economy is estimated to generate over 180,000 new jobs for our kids and grandkids, fill our personal pocketbooks with $130 billion in additional household income, and grow our economy by adding $183 billion to Utah's gross domestic product. In fact, for every taxpayer dollar we invest in transportation, we'll get nearly double in return to state coffers. So let's keep Utah moving by investing in our transportation future today. Get involved at utah.transportation.org.
So what you saw there was a lot of our research we had done. So the Unified Transportation Plan that was everybody rolled into 25 years, we hired a firm to do an economic impact study of what that investment would mean. Now most people would say that's just going to be construction jobs. These guys modeled the ease of congestion, productivity gains. This is where I was a quant, and I was like, these are guys we hire. We don't hire the guys that just do direct impact from construction spending economic analysis. That isn't going to help us. But for legislators, they care about the economy. That's their job. They're making sure we manage a good economy, and this really resonated with them. They got there a lot quicker, and it helped them talk to their constituents about why they were going to be a yes vote on a tax increase. We have supermajority Republicans in both our Senate and House, and so getting a 5-cent increase through was not easy. This is our latest ad. This is what's running right now. We've got again, 17 counties. We have one media market in Utah because everybody lives around the front. Our rural counties benefit from one media market, so we can maximize our spend in a different way than other communities can.
I'm voting to fix our sidewalks.
I'm voting for more trails. I'm voting to fix this pothole.
I'm voting for a shorter commute.
When you vote yes on Proposition 1, you're voting for improvements to be made in your local community, like better streets, improved transit options, and more bike trails for your family. Vote yes on Prop 1 and help us all enjoy a better quality of life. Paid for by Utahns for responsible transportation investments.
I like that line at the end where you have to be transparent about everything. There's messaging built into the PIC name, right? So those ads are running right now. We have another ad that are just stakeholders. So my boss, the guy from the natural gas company, the mom, the mayor from down south, they're all on an ad saying, we're in it together, Prop 1 for all. Actually, we're in such a conservative state that I got called a socialist for that marketing tagline, for all. He's like, if you Google that, that's like China's socialist marketing. And I'm like, are the Three Musketeers socialists? New tools. So, messaging is going to be customized. And by the way, I work at the chamber. I stung when somebody called me a socialist. I was like, I work at the place that's free enterprise. This is tough. New tools. So, I've been on the last 3 campaigns. They've been interesting because the tools have evolved in a real way. I'm going to just highlight a couple from this last one. Personalizing the benefit. We had an intern that had a great idea. She just said, I want to go fill a pothole with a bunch of stuff. If you go to our Prop 1 Facebook, there's a dog sitting next to my least favorite one, and it's the most popular one. There's a dog sitting next to a pothole full of dog food. And people just on Facebook go crazy, and all it does is drive them to the website where they get real substantive information. Or this one we did, Prop 1 will cost you the same as a movie night with your sweetie. $40, popcorn, 2 tickets. On the website, they can become part of the campaign. I would say now more than ever, you've got to build your coalition from other people outside of who knows what. If they're just going to be passionate about it on their own, that's a win. So you've got to provide options for them to do that. So if you go to prop1utah.com, you can scroll down and you can essentially become part of the campaign through social media. And it's all fact-driven. It's all the stats-driven, where we're still landing at good, reliable data, which is a big thing for me because I hate, you don't put brand on the line just to sell something. So we always lean on good data. For all our electeds, every week during the campaign, we've essentially provided them with talking points that they can go to their constituents with and say, hey, this is why we're doing this, why it's important. And we always made sure that if somebody got out there on their own, so we had a South Jordan city councilors, they're a super majority in a suburban town in Salt Lake. Their mayor wrote an op-ed that was American for Prosperity talking points, a Tea Party guy, this is crazy, why are we doing this? The supermajority council wrote their own op-ed, put it in the paper and said the mayor's wrong. We made sure we ran that around town, because if the elected step up, you need to make sure you're saying thank you, right? Quantify your results, that's all that meant. That's a media report that we'd get weekly on how we're doing about our outreach and everything. Messaging only matters as long as you're nimble. So if we were just pushing the wrong message the whole time, it's not very effective. So we're always changing our message to fit where we're getting the most traction. This is the thing I talked about with your engineering and transportation firms going above and beyond. Parsons Brinckerhoff developed an app for this latest campaign. It's super cool. You can go on the App Store or Android Store and get it. It has a map of types of improvements that we can use the funds for. It's got 170 of them across the Wasatch Front. I'll show you a picture of just the map itself, but they did that in kind and then donated the in-kind work to the campaign. Pretty, I'm gonna say it was about 75 grand. It was no small thing for them to do. They also built this website, so we knew people were really passionate about clean air. If they care about clean air, they're on the clean air team all the way. Give them a way to engage specific to their one thing that they care about. This is the map. That's the website. You can type in your zip code and customize it. Again, personalizing the message. This was hard because we didn't want to get too specific too quickly, because you're going to spend the money before you got it, and it's not a bond, right? You're not saying this list of projects is going to get paid for with this. It's this type of projects, because it's a sales tax. It's getting locked in perpetuity until we pull it off. So it was hard to balance specificity, because you're not going to vote for it because it's not your sidewalk outside your door. Or maybe you are going to vote for it because it's this really busy road that you're used to seeing all the time. That was a really tough data question on how to get that right.
What is your sales tax rate?
Depends on the county. Everybody hovers about 7% now. So Salt Lake County will be the highest if this passes, and it'll be at 7%.
Showed the last ad minutes ago making canvas that is paid for by utilities for transportation investments. What is that?
So that's a political issues committee. We have to file that through our Lieutenant Governor's office, elections office. It's the PAC. So we would, in some states, you'd establish a PAC to run the campaign, just so you disclose donors. By the way, if A for P comes for town, ask them to disclose their donors about who's pushing their messaging. They don't do that. But it's for ballot initiatives in Utah, you have to file a very specific electioneering tool called a PIC. And so it's where all the money comes from. And you got to show expenditures and you got to show contributions the whole way.
So Michael, does the chamber form the PAC?
In our case, we did. So we actually don't do at the chamber itself. So I work from the Salt Lake Chamber. We're the statewide chamber, because when 85% of people live in one spot, you get a lot of SWAT just being in the center of commerce. We don't do political giving traditionally. We don't get involved in elections traditionally, so that we are really outside our comfort zone leading the campaign for a proposition. So it's been a learning experience. But yeah, we have the staff in-house that are running the campaign, and we file the campaign reports. Our CFO does all the financials for it right now. It's been interesting. And that is it. That's the presentation. Go ahead.
Utah have a state income tax, and do you know how much HUD helped at all getting that proof of concept built in the 90s?
So her question was, do we have an income tax? Yes. It's 5% flat rate across the board, corporate and personal. As far as HUD helping the proof of concept, DOT did. So we got a grant like we probably would have gotten if we had passed the ballot initiative, probably a lot smaller. But the feds stepped up and helped us get the first project done.
Could we get one of those? Do they do that anymore?
I'm not close enough to that to tell you. I know, so in the case of the streetcar, it was a Tiger grant.
Right.
I know the House just passed out the new extension, and then they have a longer term bill they're working on. I don't know the size of the Tiger grant pool, but I think that's the closest to it. We also had a guy named Bob Bennett, Senator Bob Bennett. He was the chair of the banking committee in DC. That helped. Any other questions?
Just give Mike a big hand. I do have a question. Is your app still up?
It is.
Okay.
So you can just go in the App Store and click Prop 1 Utah and go through it. I didn't do it justice. It has the map. It's actually got a social media hub, so people become part of the campaign through the app. Tells them where to vote, a whole bunch of stuff.
So the map feature does what?
The map feature just shows types of projects within the 4 major counties that have it on the ballot this year. So we did a voluntary survey because you can't ask the electeds. When you go to the ballot, Utah's laws change on what electeds can and can't do. It's very hard for them to be advocates at that point, especially the governments. Like government can't get in front of a tax increase. So we did a voluntary survey of how would you spend this money, and then that's what we use to map the projects. And it's everything from sidewalk improvements to resealing a road to UTA, our transit authority, probably provided the best data. They got 3,000 employees. They do a good job. They have comprehensive lists of all the service enhancements they would have done. It's really rich data.
So the audience for the app are people that are for proposition?
So the map,
Your allies would be using that?
at the outset, we thought of it as a campaign hub. Remember, we passed the legislation in March, and we're at the ballot in November. It's been a pretty quick time period to get everything in order, but at the outset, the app was supposed to be a campaign hub. It's turned into a really rich resource. When you go, how is this money going to get spent? I have a resource for you to see really tangibly how it is, and it seems to be working with voters. So we've had, I believe, like 1,500 downloads of the app, and then the map on the website. So the map is on the website as well. We've had like 25,000 just hanging out. They spend an average of 5.5 minutes on the map website. So they're checking stuff out. The Big Brother is creepy, man.
Michael's going to be around for...
Yeah, I need to...
Yeah, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then please come back right into the room because we've got a great panel coming up that I think you'll want to hear. So 10 minutes, and Michael will be here, and if you want to talk to him for a minute, that'd be great. All right? Very pleased to hear from our panel of speakers. We have David Fox from McNeely, Piggott and Fox. Hey, David.
I'll pay you later.
Patricia Harris-Moorhead, she's the Director of Communications. She's the Director of Communications and Marketing with RTA MTA. We have Jeff Hammond, who is the Project Manager with RPM. Tommy, you're leading this. And then Deb Varallo, a lot of you may know, she's the President of Varallo Public Relations. And she's a TCLA alumni. So yes, she's been through the class. And let me tell you how this next part of the program is going to go. We're going to start down with David, and I'm going to allow each one of them to speak about 5 minutes in their respective area of expertise. I want everyone to get to speak first. When Deb has finished, then we're going to open the floor up for questions. But I want to make sure everybody gets to speak. You get to hear everybody's presentation. And then at the end, you can ask questions, and you can ask it to a specific person, or you can just ask it to the panel in general, and 2 or 3 of them may want to answer the question. So with that, David Fox, I'm going to let you kick it off.
Okay, I'm going to come stand over here. Thank you all. I've got 2 microphones. Thank you all very much for having us here and having me here. And let me start off. I'm David Fox with McNeely, Piggott & Fox. We're a PR firm that's been around for going on 30 years here in town and have been involved in a lot of projects, and most recently transit projects. So we are currently working with MTA, RTA on the long-range strategic planning process that they are working on called InMotion, and that's what I'm going to talk about in a minute. I will say that I was on the trip along with Deb and some other folks in here to Salt Lake City, and truly was blown away by what we saw out there. We were just talking, my kind of assessment of it is that we are kind of in the early stages of this whole effort. Salt Lake City is like in the PhD program for transit. So the great thing was to be able to see that if you do this the right way and go about it the right way, you can achieve great things in the transit world and things that can really move your community forward. So the whole question for us is, how do we go about it in the right way? And I think kind of the fundamental piece, kind of what we're all going to be talking about is community engagement, how we get the public involved in this process. I think what we've seen, we worked on the AMP project. We also worked on the Nashville Next project with the planning department, and as well as a number of other projects over the years, and getting the community dialogue established well on the front end of the project is critical. So when Steve Bland began working at MTA, RTA, and decided we needed to step back and after the AMP process had completed, he was in the negotiations with a consultant to begin a strategic planning process. He said, the first thing we're going to set as a goal in this process is to engage with at least 10,000 people in this area about this strategic plan. He set the bar high. I think we kind of feel like at this point that's a very realistic and a good goal, because unless we can get that kind of engagement at the end of the strategic planning process, we're not going to have something that we can then go back to the community and say, okay, this is the feedback we got, and this is kind of where we're headed with this plan. So I don't have a PowerPoint or anything, but I did put some handouts on your at your places. Those handouts, and they're 3-hole punch, so you can put them in your binders. They contain a project overview. They contain basically some PowerPoint slides that we've used in the past to show how this process is going. They include the guiding principles and the values that are guiding the InMotion process, and also a list of the strategies that are included. So basically we've been at this for 6 months, this strategic planning process, and have about another 6 months to go. We've engaged with about 6,300 people so far, so we're more than halfway to that 10,000 goal, but we kind of see that 10,000 goal as something that we need to surpass, and significantly surpass, to do this the right way. We're doing a lot of community talks. We're doing a lot of social media communications. We're doing a lot of Nextdoor. I don't know how many of y'all are on Nextdoor, but if you're not, I would suggest that you find out. It's a neighborhood kind of a listserv type of thing, but it's community-wide, and it is a place where a lot of the discussion, the digital discussion about transit is taking place right now. And I did want to take 1 second and show the if we've got it, I don't, no, that's not it. Yeah, that is it, that is it. Okay, so the website is inmotion2015.org, and on it you will find the sign up for updates to sign up, and also the basically the strategy documents that you will can go through. So can you click on that click here there? On the right there. Comment on our discussion forum. So this is the list of strategies that are currently being reviewed that will become part of the strategic plan. There's about 22 strategies that are currently up, and there's going to be a total of 30 by the time it's over, which is going to probably be in a couple of weeks. And each one of these little paragraphs you see takes you to a white paper that's about anywhere from 6 to 10 pages long. And in that are in-depth discussions of the strategies that we're going to be considering on how do we improve our transit system. So if there's anything I would say to this group, if there's anything you could do, spend some time on this website with these strategies, become familiar with them, because that's really going to be a lot of what is going to inform the discussion that we have as we get through this part of the process, and then begin talking about the specific scenarios for transit that we'll be proposing. So I'm going to stop there. That's kind of my 2 cents worth. Didn't mean to cause everybody to get out of their chair.
I'm going to stay here.
Okay, thank you, David, and thank you all for the invitation to be here this evening. I'm Patricia Harris-Moorhead, Communications and Marketing Director for MTA and RTA, and I've been with the RTA since 2002, or with MTA since 2002. We became the management team for the RTA services in 2008 when our RTA board and Mayor Dean asked us to take over those services. So we serve as the management team for both. And I wanted to talk with you a little bit about how ridership has changed since I came on board with the MTA back in 2002. Back in 2002 when I started, basically the Nashville MTA was a little mom and pop shop operation. Prior to that, our CEO was basically a general manager who was employed by a transportation management company in another state. Well, when Mayor Purcell was mayor, the first thing that he did was order an audit of the MTA to look at our resources. And that audit basically came back and said that we were seriously understaffed, underfunded, and we needed our own CEO. And so the first CEO that was hired was Paul Ballard, and he is our only Metro government employee. He reports to our board of directors as well as the city council, and the rest of us were, the management team that operate the MTA and the RTA. But since then, we have grown our ridership. Back in 2002, our ridership was probably around 4 million passenger trips annually. This past fiscal year that ended on June 30th, we had more than 10 million passenger trips on the MTA. On the RTA services, we had more than 850,000 passenger trips. The RTA, as you all probably have learned so far, consists of our Music City Star, the Middle Tennessee's only modern-day commuter rail, and we have about 10 express bus routes that go to communities such as Clarksville and Springfield and Spring Hill. We contract that service out through Gray Line, so we run Gray Line express buses to those communities. And we contract the Music City Star operations out to a company as well. So basically, this last fiscal year, we came within striking distance of, more than 11 million passenger trips in the region. So transportation is growing in Middle Tennessee. It's very much on the minds of individuals. To prepare for this tonight, I took a look at a study. a survey that we conducted in 2011 with the MPO. And when we did this survey back in 2011, 32% of our ridership is what we considered, we use in the transportation industry as those choice riders. They have other options, but they choose to ride public transportation. The rest of them are, back then in 2011, were made up of dependent riders, those who did not have the choice. And 50% of those trips that those individuals made were for work. 20% were for social or entertainment, 10% were for school, 8% for shopping, 7% for medical. 72% of those riders told us that they used our services frequently, mainly at least once a day. And about 85% of those told us that they walked to transit stops, and those transit stops were within a quarter of a mile. So as we also know in Metro Nashville, we have an issue with sidewalks. We have to make basically that first mile, last mile more amenable to individuals, to pedestrians who want to walk to those stops. And so that's something too that we have to work on in order to continue to kind of grow ridership in the area. But I wanted to just kind of give you that little snapshot so that you can understand, who's riding our buses today. We have something like 46 different routes within the MTA system. As I mentioned with RTA, we have those 10 express bus routes plus the commuter rail service. And so we have a lot more people that are riding transit. We have a lot more individuals who are moving to Middle Tennessee because of our quality of life. And I really do appreciate that all of you are taking time out of your busy schedules to attend this Transit Leadership Academy so that you can help us stress to your neighbors and your family members how important transit is to our community. Thanks.
I'm up, right? I'm up. I'll echo that. Your commitment to this endeavor and this subject matter is really inspiring. Thank you for what you're doing in bringing this information back to your communities and promoting this subject here in Nashville. I don't have to tell you, it's been a tremendous boost in the conversation in terms of traffic and transportation. My name is Jeff Hammond. I'm a traffic engineer with RPM Transportation based here in Nashville. Our practice is about 28 years old, and up until the past couple of years, we really had done nothing but traffic. Probably 10 to 15 years ago, we got very heavily into bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. That was a new thing back then, and we've been working very seriously in that arena in addition to our traffic work since then. And then here about 3-4 years ago, we got involved in our first transit projects, and have been worked with David and all on the AMP project. Continue to be engaged with the MTA and the long range plan, doing some infrastructure data collection on the park and rides for that effort. But it's been real interesting to see that shift in how in the mayoral election and all of the different arenas, transit and transportation has really gotten elevated, as I don't have to tell you. I want to just mention two aspects of transit connectivity that I think are really important as we think about how do we communicate this message. And the first one is pretty apparent. It's that, like Michael talked about, it's that analytical approach that only an engineer could love when we start talking about making sure these routes work and they connect and serve people through the entire transit trip in a very convenient way. A lot of our work, the tools that we use, the models that we use to look at transportation issues have their roots way back in behavioral sciences, where we're asking some pretty basic questions like, am I going to make a trip? What's my destination going to be? When am I going to make that trip? What route am I going to take to make that trip? If I do decide to make a trip and I do select a route, can I change that route while the trip's going on? Can I decide to make other trips off of my main trip? and on and on. And lastly, I think as it pertains probably more to this group in this discussion, what mode am I going to use to make that trip, whether it's private car, bus, Uber, bike, whatever. And as you go through that list of questions, you begin to see it's very hard to match the convenience of the private automobile. That's why it's been the mainstream form of transportation, and really the primary role, only real role, form of transportation in this area for a long time. So to be a very reasonable alternative, transit's got to work hard, and this connected system has to be really good in trying to approximate some of the conveniences of the private automobile. Those things have to occur on two different levels. First of all, those lines do have to meet. And when I make, as was mentioned earlier, it's hard to be very efficient in transit. I mean, it has certain limitations. And as I get off of one transit vehicle and board another, that has to be done very seamlessly, or we're going to lose a lot of riders. So the physical connection between making that connection is important. But also there's a time component to that. And if that doesn't happen pretty quickly, we're going to lose riders that way. So I can't get off of one mode of transit and engage another and have a 40-minute delay in between. It's not like when I'm catching a flight on an airplane. And maybe I'll make the connection and maybe I won't, because if that happens one time, my future as a transit rider is not going to be very long. Those are really just the nuts and bolts, though. Those are the analytical things, and one fairly small component of the connectivity issue. But there's another one that's a little harder, I think, to talk about. It's probably harder to get a message across. And certainly I'm probably not as equipped to speak to this, because it is somewhat less concrete. And that's the aspect of transit connectivity that says transit becomes a connected part of our communities. And it really becomes ingrained in how the community fabric operates and works and sees itself. And it will change the community as it is in place. And as the community recognizes that it's in place and continues to grow around it. We see that primarily in the development arena. And we're seeing it now in places like Lebanon and Mount Juliet and Donaldson, and places that are served by the STAR networks. And it's taken these number of years for a lot of that to come to fruition. But it's happening at this time. And I think that aspect of connectivity, more than just the analytical, more than just making sure those trips are convenient, which is critical, but I think it's that aspect of it that we have to work very hard to get that message across as well, that our communities will change because of this. It will change for the better because of this. And we have to work to have some vision about how that could work. And if I think that question is really bigger than if you've got a roadway network that is congested and you lay down a transit network on top of that. It's bigger than just that question of does that help congestion. It's a question about community livelihood, building places where we want to be, and more than just reducing congestion and some of the other aspects that it does as well. Look forward to any questions you have, and again, thanks for the opportunity.
All right, the train. So I got this whistle when I worked on the Music City Star. Before it was the Music City Star, it was the East Corridor at that time. And I had the opportunity to work for 6 years on it. I'm Deb Varallo with Varallo Public Relations. We do an awful lot of work similar to David, that we have fun, our paths cross, we compete against each other. I've worked on projects with RPM, I've worked on projects with RTA, MTA. So presently we're working on the study on the Northwest Corridor study, which is the study between Clarksville and Nashville. David Plazez has been so kind to do some great stories about it, which I appreciate, and let people know when we've got all these seminars and presentations going on. So David, thank you very much for that. I'm also working on the Franklin Transportation. So what my area is that I'm supposed to discuss is, just to let you guys know, and that is educating the public about future needs. The interesting thing is, some of the projects as we work on it, and just this past Saturday, we were in front of 65 people in Bordeaux and North Nashville. And as we were talking about the transportation needs between Clarksville and Nashville, and a woman stood up and said, I'm not going to be here in 25 years. So what are you going to do for me now? And as Michael says, what's in it for me? And that's what it's all about. She really wanted to know, what are you going to do for me right now? What are you going to do for me in 6 months, not 20 years, not 25 years? So your audiences vary tremendously. And I think it's fantastic that they do, because then you have this opportunity to present to so many different people. So a couple of things are, in Franklin, we developed the first ever transportation patch for the Girl Scouts. And it took a while to do this and to get it passed through it. But Franklin is the only city in the country to have a transportation patch for the Girl Scouts. Start young. Educate them young. Because what we see are transplants coming into Nashville, and they're coming from New York, they're coming from New Jersey, they're coming from California. They come in here, and I just had a person called me up and said, I don't understand it. I'm lost in Nashville, I'm trying to find your Subway. And it wasn't the sandwiches. So they just anticipated we are the it city, so we're supposed to know that we've got Subways here. The other thing that you have to do is put it in front of as many different medias as you can. I wish everybody in our greater Middle Tennessee area read the Tennessean. I'm sorry, they don't. They don't read the Business Journal. They don't read the Tennessee Ledger. They don't read the papers we want them to read. They don't listen to the radio stations we want them to listen to. So get every venue possible to do it. So it's grassroots, it's church newsletters, it's going to the senior citizens newsletters, it's making sure that you've got your hashtags, so that we've got these hashtags. When I go to presentations, some of the crowds look at me and they go, what is a hashtag? You know, what is Instagram? So I will always have an @ sign. I will always also have a hashtag sign, and I'll try to educate them on what's going on. So we're bringing them into this generation, and they're trying to also understand what's happening. Go to your audience as much as you can. Be in front of them as much as you can. Charlie knows we've been to Clarksville how many times? We're up there presenting all the time. We'll be up there as many times as they want us to be. And we go to different committees. Educate the elected officials. I'm repeating a lot of what Michael said. I'm repeating what these other people said. And so then the big thing that you always have to say is, even once you've told everybody everything, tell them again and again and again to the same audience so you can educate them. Thank you.
Okay, you've heard from 4 very capable people who are experts in their fields. This is your opportunity to ask any and all questions that you would like to know. Doc.
Question for either David or Patricia. The in-motion study, you may have said this, forgive me, but what's the expected date that's supposed to be?
The original plan was for it to started around the 1st of April this year. It was for it to be about 12 to 14 months, but there is not a specific date that it's due. The goal is to get it done in the spring, but I will say that the fact that the first 5 months of the project was done under a mayor who's no longer in office, with the new mayor coming in to take office, who is going to have a lot to say about what happens, I think everybody's kind of taken the view that we need to be flexible about this so that we don't, if Mayor Berry comes in and says, I want to take this in a different direction, then I think we've got to be flexible to do that.
I just want to add that that plan is also for the RTA counties.
Yes.
And too, right now, the emphasis is on getting out into those RTA counties. Last week, we held the first leadership meeting in Lebanon with the help of Transit Alliance of Middle Tennessee and Cumberland Region tomorrow. So we're trying to make sure that we cover all of the Middle Tennessee counties in addition to Nashville.
Just real quick, just looking at the bullet points about this focus areas of the study. Do you guys know, does the study anticipate addressing funding sources at all?
The in-motion study at the end, when it proposes scenarios that for consideration, will include costs associated with those scenarios.
Okay, but costs, but not necessarily recommendations about how to.
I think correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think the approach here is that the study is going to say, here are the recommended strategies, here's what those strategies cost, and then once that's done, then the conversation will begin about how we pay for this and what are the funding sources.
Yes, ma'am. Do you find, since this topic is really about messaging, which would be how we communicate, it's fascinating to hear all four of you because it's almost 4 different languages, and yet 2 of you are in the same field, and it's fascinating to me, how in the world do we, one of our projects is going to be creating something that can maybe be utilized locally, but how do we actually create a message that is going to impact decision-making where people are willing, because no matter what we say, if it doesn't have corresponding action and all the studies and all the planning in the world, is there some bridge?
Well, I mean, I'll real quickly say that I think it's like going to Utah and hearing what they're doing in Salt Lake City. That was a different language as well. I think our piece of this project is creating the dialogue with the public. We have got to get the public engaged in the conversation about how this is going to work if we're going to be able to then go out and say, okay, now let's talk to you about how we fund this. First of all, we've got to get them engaged in this conversation. So that's kind of where we are, which is at a real fundamental, basic level. And but anyway, so I think we're all in different places in this conversation, but we're all in the same conversation.
And I would add to that is basically the message is going to be a little different for the different audiences. So you have to target the message. You have to target your audience. Just like the way we get information out. Yes, we have some traditional writers who use our system who are used to the paper pocket schedules. That's what they want. But we know that we have more metro school students riding our buses, more university school students riding our buses, more millennials. So we are developing real-time information. Along with that package will be a transportation app that we are producing, as well as we're partnering with other entities like Vanderbilt University and some other entrepreneurs so that we'll be pushing out our real-time information to them as well. So we know we have to get the information out to different people a variety of different ways. So target marketing.
Well, the one thing is, as they're collecting the information, and there's a lot of different transportation studies going on. It just blows your mind when I get all the information of, I'm supposed to be at this meeting, this meeting, this meeting, and there are 3 different groups. And that's okay. But what we're doing is we're collecting the information for the different areas of people, for the different age of people, for the different socioeconomic aspect of people, to find out what are their specific needs that are different than different groups. So that's what we're getting. So we can't do any kind of messaging until we know what the needs are. Then we go after, that we put the message in front of where the needs are.
And all of this is in a strategic plan level. Once we get beyond this phase and you start looking at actual projects, specific projects that are being looked at that point, technical staff comes in and can begin to do more analysis. And what happened I thought last time with the AMP project is we would sit down with the PR teams and different folks from the mayor's office or whoever, and they'd say, tell me this, I want to know this question. They would start shooting us questions, and we would say, yes, we have the information, we could give you that answer, or yes, in 3 months we can give you that answer, or no, we just don't have the capabilities of that kind of an analysis, and what could we do to substitute that?
Other questions?
I don't know that it relates directly to the messaging, but for Jeff, is there anywhere in the plan that we're going to look at what we currently have in our infrastructure we have now as far as light synchronization and other, like I've been in cities where, we're going in, it's all one way that way, and then coming out, it's all the other way. As far as I know, I think just First Avenue and going into Dawson is the only one downtown that does that right now. But, I mean, will that be part of the message that you're doing?
Yeah, you're right. Hermitage still has the reversible lane there. I don't think it's part of the current MTA master plan, but as Deb said, there's a number of different studies that look at circulation issues. Metro Nashville did just get finished with a mobility study where some of that one-ways have kind of fallen out of favor for various reasons, but a lot of that has been looked at from a pedestrian standpoint, from a signal synchronization standpoint. One thing that MTA service does become very interested in is transit signal priority, by which transit buses, they don't control the signal, but they get some priority as they approach signals, and they get some favoritism, as it were, in trying to get those buses down particularly heavily congested corridors. But I don't think it's expanding to the scale of looking at an overall traffic circulation standpoint in these communities.
We did get a Tiger grant a couple of years ago. So basically, we are looking at improving Metro's signal priority system. The grant was for our Murfreesboro Road corridor. And so our partners, of course, with that is Public Works and Metro. And now that Mark Sturdivant is going to be Mayor Berry's, infrastructure officer, and he was working on that project for us with MTA, so that will continue to move forward. So it's my understanding that like Metro Public Works is involved with that, because once that's established, it can expand out to throughout Metro. Because we can't do it. I mean, we went after the grant because we wanted, the buses to go faster on Murfreesboro Road for the BRT Light project. But, that project is more comprehensive than just, helping us out. Like once that technology is in place, it will help all of Metro, is my understanding. And they're just now getting into that. Like we got that grant maybe 2 years ago, and then there's all kind of other hoops you have to jump through with FTA to kind of draw down that money and get the local match, the capital match. And so they're just getting into it.
Technology is changing so much with all that real-time information.
Absolutely.
Moving the traffic.
Hi, I just want to be clear. So right now, the phase that you guys are in is meeting with different organizations and groups and communities to find out the need. You're conversating with them about, their
So Rita, let me say this, just so you understand.
Okay.
We've got a lot of different studies going on. So I'm on 3 different studies, one in Franklin, one between Clarksville and Nashville, and also for TDOT, a 25-year study, statewide plan. So they all vary. The one that I want to make sure that you understand, the InMotion, that is the one probably that you may be asking about, I think, on it. Just so, okay. And that's why my speak may be different than theirs.
That's why I want to be clear.
Because InMotion they'll piggyback on, they'll come to our presentations and we'll incorporate them into our presentation so they can take advantage of us having 65 people or 70 people or 25 people, whatever. So the InMotion is totally separate than really what I'm doing.
But her Northwest Corridor study, like the technical folks that she's working with on Northwest Corridor study, that information is going to feed into the technical information for our
They need
motion.
me. No.
I mean, because it's MTA and RTA.
Right.
So as far as we're concerned, like the Clarksville is kind of being taken care of with the Northwest study going on. And David's our focus is Metro Nashville and the other RTA counties.
Right, so back to David. So when you guys are out meeting with the community organizations, are you actually doing the messaging then? Or
Well, what we're doing is Steve Bland is typically the leader, the person that speaks, but we also have what are called transit talks, where individuals with MTA, RTA are going and meeting with small groups who are going to be meeting anyway and want them to come in and speak. And so they basically tell the story of what this process is, where we are in the process. We've got 6,000 people have given us feedback, and that feedback has revealed a certain set of facts that we share with them. And then we were in Wilson County with Joanne last Thursday night, Steve and Felix Castrodad from MTA presented to the group, and then basically opened it up. Let's talk about what you want to talk about, which in Wilson County, there's a lot of conversation about the Music City Star. which is, so you learn, you go to Wilson County and you learn one set of facts or one set of input, and then you go to another county, go to Clarksville, you learn something entirely different.
But we are hearing some common themes.
Yeah.
We're hearing that people in the Middle Tennessee area, they want their transit to operate later hours. We're hearing that. They want some weekend services, want us to improve frequency.
More frequent service in the main corridors.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, just a quick follow-up before you get on.
Yes.
The Northwest Corridor study, is that an RTA?
RTA, yes. It's part of the RTA MTA study, and we probably will have information finalized on the first realm of it within January, and then we'll go further. And I want to say something else about the 10-county area, because we are in Middle Tennessee. That's what we're all talking about. That's what you guys all represent. So I chair Leadership Middle Tennessee, which is a 10-county region. We're assisting on getting people to these meetings in the different counties, because the folks that are in the different counties, if we're in Davidson County, we're lucky in the sense that everything, we get to kind of go out that way, but everybody else that has to come into our county or has to come into the county for work or for business, for other purposes, or even social, they've got to fight traffic. I mean, I fight traffic from Old Hickory every morning and every night, but I'm covering 10 counties a lot, visiting people. The traffic is horrendous, and everybody in all the other counties are going, what can we do? What can we do to make this easier for people? So this is a group effort that we've got to all work together on this.
Of those responses that you've talked to, the 6,000 people, are they, how many of those are current riders?
I actually could tell you that, but I don't, not off the top of my head. But I would say I'd say it's about 30% current riders, 70% non-riders at this point on that survey. The one factor about that to keep in mind is that a lot of the numbers from that have come in through digital responses to surveys, that we've given on social media or through emails. And a lot of the contact we've gotten from current riders has been on interviews on buses.
Right. And at Music City Central, we had survey teams there as well.
Other questions?
I have a
Go ahead, Don.
question, I just didn't want to keep raising my hand.
No, that's okay.
I guess Jeff or anybody, data just got to be overwhelming on this, and I know Michael referred to it as well. What's the best place to go get data, like how many cars are on the road, or how many households, or what? Is there some one or two or three best places that?
Well, you can't have too much of it.
The engineer.
It's called Jeff.
The MPO is the Metropolitan Planning Organization. They are a holder of a lot of our regional data sources. Now, they will link you sometimes to TDOT, which keeps really good historical traffic counts. Those are available on TDOT's website. You can pull up. There's about 12,000 locations across the state. They count every year. You can see it from 1988 through 2015. That's a good source. But as far as forecasts and model, again, those can come from various sources. The MPO's travel demand model is a good source. They are very, very soon to release the latest version of that. That'll be like Christmas morning for us. We can't wait. So yeah, between the MPO and TDOT, they should be able to get you what you need.
There's also Vital Signs, which is a chamber project that Michael referenced, is a good data resource too.
Any other questions? So do you guys sort of map out opposition, right, and who, if any, is opposing sort of some of the work that you're trying to do, or who are the naysayers, and how do you counter that?
Well, I'm not at that point yet in what we're working on, although we do get naysayers there at the different meetings who say they're going to die before we, why do I want to spend the money? I mean, we get a lot of issues like that, but we're not at that. I'm not, on my 3 studies I'm doing, I'm not at that point yet. I don't know if you guys are or not.
I mean, we are not at that point in this project. With the AMP, we identified a group of opponents who were very vocal, and we also engaged with the legislature and found opposition there. And we know that there are going to be those issues to deal with. I will say that Mayor Berry met with Speaker Harwell and Governor Ramsey Monday, which is a good step in general terms in the city-state relationships, and we are very interested in one of the things that was mentioned several times is the interaction with lawmakers and with elected officials, and that's a big piece of what we're working on right now.
One last question, anybody?
Just make a quick comment. Dan and I were at the Wilson County meeting. It was very good, and we were just talking. That's probably new information to the majority of the folks that we've kind of been immersed in this for a few weeks, but I think it was new information to a lot of folks in the room. And it's kind of a soft launch out there with the star. I'll be curious to hear what Murfreesboro and some of the other counties have to say.
Come on down.
Murfreesboro is next Thursday night, November 5th, if anybody would like to be there, so.
Yes.
And that's our busiest RTA express run. I mean, it's right up there with Clarksville. It was one of the original RTA lines that we put in service, so we have a number of trips that, you know, go to and from Murfreesboro and Smyrna, but it's one of the more popular ones because of, you know, all that I-24 traffic.
I just thought of something. Is there a pack already for what you're working on?
A PAC?
Yeah, like there was an AMP coalition or something.
I mean,
That
we are not there in anywhere near that on our side of the thing. Now, you know, so the MTA RTA is doing a strategic planning process, which is a you know, publicly funded process. What happens once the you know, the discussion about funding of, you know, or dedicated funding begins, that'll be a whole different level of this conversation.
But you just can't skip the process of strategic planning.
Right.
No.
And we all want to jump to the answer, and then how are we going to get,
Right.
how are we going to advocate for the taxes or whatever they need to fund it, but you have to start where we are now, where this is going.
Right.
That's it.
And currently,
That's what Ed didn't do, I guess. Am I correct in that, or are they short-circuited?
They did it, but
well, we had like, and it's currently on our website. Our current strategic plan is on the website. It was adopted by our board in 2009, and it had proposed within that a service similar to full bus rapid service on West End. And so we're now at the place where we needed to do another strategic plan update because we completed practically all of the short-term, midterm, long-term goals that we had for that last strategic plan. So it was a 5-year strategic plan. We would have to report to our board of directors quarterly what progress we were making, you know, for those goals. And so, you know, successfully we completed practically everything on that plan, and it was time to do a new plan. We got a new CEO, and then, you know, with the controversy, with the AMP, this time around, we said, you know what? We're going to do a better job with community engagement and getting out there so that we can talk to as many people as possible about what the options can be for Middle Tennessee. Yes.
Build it into a cohesive.
Yes, yes.
If I could just interject, this project is about education. Michael said, when he came up here and presented in Utah, their effort failed the first time because they didn't educate people about what it was about and how it would work and what was in it for them. I don't know whether we'll be finished 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, a year from now, but the whole process is to educate people and find out what projects are important to them and how it could work and what it might cost. And then you're still going to need to ask the public what they want. So, I mean, this is not a slam dunk, and I don't want anybody to think that. This is a very thoughtful, deliberate process by a lot of different folks, and these 4 people up here only represent some. There are a whole host of people that are out there that are not even here tonight. So, you know, it's a process, and I want everybody to understand that. And the other thing I'm going to say real quickly, and I want them to stay here in case somebody asks a question and if I've said anything wrong. There's 2 issues. You have inter-county and you have intra-county. And you know, I live in Sumner County, so I think more of the inter-county, and it's jobs and it's economic development, and that's really what drives it all. And that's a huge thing, and it's an issue that all of us ought to be concerned about. But I was called to come to a focus group in Nashville. And I walked into this room, the MTA, and I sat down at the table, and I knew a few people, but there were a lot of people sitting there. I didn't know who they were. Well, they were the senior citizens. They were the Disability Coalition. They were the school groups. I can't even name all the groups that were there. There were groups there that I never even thought that transit impacted. People with disabilities, a lot of them can't drive a car. They are dependent on transportation to have any kind of quality of life. I mean, they can't get to their jobs. Some of these were high school students that can't drive because they have some physical disability. They have to have a good transit system so that they can go to work and they can come home and they can be a productive citizen. Senior citizens who can't drive anymore still want to go places, still want to take advantage of all the wonderful things Nashville has to offer, need to get to a doctor's appointment. Transit gives them those qualities. I mean, it's just so much more than just jobs and economic development, which is when I started, that's all we heard. But after I walked out of that meeting, I went home to my husband, I was like, wow, I just never thought about it in a holistic view. And even the people that live in Nashville come out and work in our counties. You could have a senior citizen or a student who's disabled that wants to work in Wilson County or Sumner County or any of those counties. So it's a big issue, and we want to make sure we do it right. So I don't want anybody to think this is moving fast, because it may move slow. So I want to thank all these panelists. They have given up their personal time to come tonight, and we just appreciate them being here, and I appreciate everything that they are doing, because they're going to make the world a little bit better place when they get all this information and they put it all together. So let's give them a big round of applause.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you. It made me feel nice.
Carrie's standing up in the back of the room, so I know I need to move on. She keeps me on cue. David Plazas, I believe, has something exciting that he's working on. David, you want to come up and talk about it? I think he's great. He's one of our class. Come on, David.
So David Fox and his team and I have been working together to create this live chat. And it's another way to reach people regarding this issue of transit. And in the InMotion structure, I was at the first meeting actually last winter, and it's been exciting to see what people are wanting. I ride a bus at least once a week. I try to really understand what the routes are. I even took my parents on an all-day bus tour that took us from Germantown all the way to Nolensville, all the way to, it was during Country Music Festival, so it was a really interesting time to ride. But I'm really passionate about this particular issue. So next Wednesday, after our class time, obviously it's not mandatory, but if you do choose to stay at 6:45 p.m., we're hosting a live chat with Steve Bland, the CEO of MTA and RTA, to talk about the questions that people have. So if you haven't seen InMotion2015.com, please take a look at it and take a look at the blog comments, because they're really interesting. For me, one of the things that has been a point of frustration is that to get to work, it's a 5-minute drive from Germantown to work, but if I want to take a bus, it's 25 minutes because I have to stop in downtown. And this was one of the things that I found that most people were talking about in these blog comments. Is there a way that we can get from point A to point B without having to go into downtown? So that's just one of the aspects of it, but we're going to talk about the upcoming transit app that Transit Now has been beta testing. We're going to be talking about any other question that you might have. So again, it's 6:45 p.m. and we're going to have on the projector a showing of the comments by Steve and by other people who want to contribute. The hashtag, I believe, is InMotion, and I'll make sure to get all the information to Carrie so that you can have that, and please participate. And if you'd help us promote it to the audiences around the region, that would be really helpful. And again, if you have any questions, just let me know. Thank you very much.
So I hope some of you all will plan to stay and maybe give some comments. I think that'd be great to be coming from our class. Now, we're going to adjourn to our favorite part. to get in our group discussions. And we've had a lot of conversations going on. One of the things I'd like you to talk about tonight in your groups might be a little bit about messaging. You know, how do you develop a message of support? What resonates with people? What makes them want to support transit? Who is the audience? You know, as I told you, there are so many groups out there that you never really stop to think about, but they're all impacted by whether we can get from point A to point B. And how are you going to deliver that message? So that might be something you want to talk about a little bit tonight in your group. We do have, about 25 minutes. I think this is probably the longest time we've given you in a while. I feel like we've cheated you just a little bit. But we're going to give you 25 minutes tonight to work in your respective groups. We'll be here if anybody has any questions, and we'll look forward to hearing your outcomes. Thanks.